Hi and welcome to our documentary about biodiversity. We're going to talk about loss of biodiversity and its effects on the climate.
So what does biodiversity mean? Well, it means a lot of different things. For one, it can mean the variation of the genetics in a species. It can also mean the different species in an area. It can also mean the different types of environments.
An ecosystem with a lot of biodiversity is more resilient to climate change and change in environment. Therefore, a loss of biodiversity will cause a lot more ecosystems to collapse.
Decrease in the amount of water-living flora and fauna can also be attributed to over-fertilization, caused by high amounts of fertilizer runoff into the water. All the excess nutrients in the water causes algae biomass to skyrocket. This, in turn, causes massive damage to the plant life under the surface, since they can't perform photosynthesis without sunlight, which the blanket of algae blocks. In Floridian rivers, the manatee population is starving. Seagrats, which the manatee eats, can't produce glucose to survive because of the lack of sunlight. Since nothing on the ocean floor can photosynthesize, a lack of oxygen soon becomes a problem. Not for the manatee though, because it's one of our fellow mammals.
However, over-fertilization is not the only thing in the water killing these arguably ugly animals. Boat collisions actually cause on average 20% of American manatee deaths annually. Pollutants like lead and other chemicals worsen the water quality of the Florida rivers. Obviously, it's bad for health of everything when a bunch of crap gets into the water you drink/live in. Now we are in a forest that hasn't been touched by man in a very long time. That means there grows a lot of different species of trees and plants here, which in turn increases biodiversity.
Overfishing and overhunting are two major causes for the loss of biodiversity. Here with us today we have a Swedish hunter, Bo Jansson, who will tell us more about this.
Well, you can call me Bosse. Well, vänta. En brunnsältjur! Här.
Another thing that is hurting the biodiversity is when exotic species are introduced to new ecosystems. This causes the new species to compete with the species who are already living there. Since the new species probably doesn't have any natural predators, the new species will dominate. A great example of this is the Caribbean mongoose. It was brought to the Caribbean islands from India to control the rat and venomous snake population. The mongoose flawlessly executed its mission. The problem is that it breeds very quickly, and it doesn't have any natural predators. The people of the Caribbean are now trying to eradicate the animal because the population has gotten out of control.
Now we are going to talk about a place where biodiversity has decreased significantly, the USA. For example, a third of the country's avian species like birds and bats are threatened and have decreased a lot the last couple of years. The destruction of habitat is one of the main causes for loss of biodiversity. Here we see a clear example of a place where they have cut down all the trees to make money on the timber, which in turn causes a lot of species to not be able to live here. But they have left some tall tree stumps like this one to preserve the original biodiversity, because birds and insects can live in these. In conclusion, the loss of biodiversity happens everywhere on the planet and not only in the Amazonas or in the African jungles, which often gets most of the attention. Animals that used to be commonly seen in our backyards are nowadays rare to encounter. This is clearly seen in the US, where a lot of the wildlife was replaced with fields or enclosures to house farm animals. But some actions are taken to preserve the biodiversity, like demolishing dams and making more nature reserves, but far from enough to stop the loss of biodiversity. There are many ways to counter this problem. Here are a few examples. Limiting the areas used as cattle enclosures, which is a big problem in the US, where 25% of the country's surface is used as feeding grounds for cattle. 20% of the US is used to grow crops, and 70% of all those crops are used for feeding animals. That means 39% of the whole landmass of the USA is used to produce meat. Therefore, we need to eat less meat because the production of meat requires huge amounts of land, which once was home to a much bigger variety of animals and plants. Another solution is to decrease our general consumption. For example, mass-produced sheep clothes are bad for the biodiversity because when they are made, the producers want to make them as cheap as possible, and therefore do not care about how they affect the environment they take the resources from. So one solution is to be careful with what you buy and go for an eco-friendly choice instead of a cheap price.
So how are you feeling now, Bosse?
Well, I'm fucking jävligt nöjd. We have a 17 taggare here with väldigt många kilo. Yes.
A great hunt.